December 17, 1944, 0800 hours. Boulingen, Belgium. SS Oberfuhrer Young Piper stood in the town square, observing his men refuel his tanks. American tanks, American fuel. American jerry cans being poured into German panzers at gunpoint while American prisoners of war operated the pumps. Piper commanded Kampfgruppe Piper, the spearhead unit of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandard Adolf Hitler, 4,800 men, 117 tanks and assault guns. His mission was straightforward: punch through American lines, advance west, seize the Meuse River bridges, and split the Allied armies in two. The offensive had begun 30 hours earlier. Hitler called it Operation Walk dem Rhein, the largest German attack in the West since 1940. 3 armies, 250,000 men, 1,400 tanks and assault guns. The objective was Antwerp: cut off the British and Canadian forces, force the Americans to Bastogne and Dinant, and change the course of the war. But there was a problem: fuel. The German High Command had allocated 5 million gallons of gasoline for the entire operation. Basic calculations indicated the panzers would need double that to reach Antwerp. The planners knew this, and their solution was simple: capture American fuel depots, take what was needed, and keep advancing. Piper's divisional intelligence officer had given him a map before the attack, showing American supply installations, fuel dumps, ammunition depots, and supply points. The intelligence was precise. Americans had stockpiles everywhere. The question was whether the Germans could seize them before the Americans destroyed them. Boulingen was the first test. Kampfgruppe Piper had taken the town at 0730 that morning. The Americans had retreated so rapidly that they left everything behind: the fuel depot intact, 50,000 gallons, enough to refuel Piper's entire spearhead and continue west. American prisoners handled the pumps. Piper had ordered it. His own men were exhausted, having fought for 36 hours straight. Let the Americans fill their own tanks. Efficient and humiliating, which Piper considered useful psychological warfare. The fuel flowed. Piper watched the jerrycans being passed hand to hand. Each held 5 gallons. 10 cans per tank. Multiply by 100 tanks, 5,000 gallons. Refueling would take hours. Hours Piper did not have. Every minute delayed gave the Americans time to reorganize their defense. But without fuel, the panzers were worthless. Steel boxes on tracks. Piper had learned that lesson on the Eastern Front: the best tank in the world was useless without fuel. In 1943, the Wehrmacht had lost more vehicles to shortages than to Soviet attacks: entire divisions immobilized, tanks abandoned, positions overrun. Now in Belgium, the same issue: German logistics had collapsed. The fuel allocated for the offensive was stuck behind the lines, traffic jams, bombed roads, and American fighter bombers attacking anything moving during daylight. Supply trucks weren't coming, so Piper had to capture American fuel or halt. One of his officers, Hauptsturmführer Neuski, approached. Neuski, Piper's personal staff officer since France, was reliable and competent. He reported the fuel situation was worse than anticipated. The 50,000 gallons at Boulingen would only get them so far. Piper already knew this. His intelligence map showed another depot at Stavelot, larger than Boulingen. The Americans would likely defend or destroy it. Either way, Piper had to reach it quickly. Refueling continued. Piper walked through the captured depot. American supplies were stacked everywhere: ammunition crates, medical supplies, rations, winter clothing, everything orderly, labeled, and abundant. He picked up a ration box, a small cardboard container with brown waterproof coating. The label read, K-Ration, Combat Individual Breakfast Unit. Piper opened it. Inside, a can of ham and eggs, hard biscuits, chocolate bar for cigarettes, instant coffee, sugar tablets, chewing gum, wooden spoon, matches, toilet paper, and a can opener. One meal, packaged compactly, no cooking required. Piper, a veteran commander since 1940, knew German rations: bulk containers requiring field kitchens, hard bread, mostly fat meat, declining in quality since 1943. By late 1944, frontline units often received nothing. His men had consumed captured food, taken from civilians, or even slaughtered horses. He noted the K-Rations manufacture date, October 1944, just 2 months old. American rations were reaching the front only weeks after production, a staggering industrial feat. Noisky came over, opened a ham and egg can, and ate it cold. He looked surprised, better than anything German soldiers had eaten in months. Real coffee, chocolate, cigarettes, even small comforts. Piper said nothing, mentally calculating, 3 meals per day per soldier, 10 million American soldiers worldwide, that was 30 million meals daily, 900 million monthly. Germany had never produced on that scale, despite mobilizing its entire armaments industry. Yet Americans packaged individual meals with compact design, waterproofing, and attention to detail, logistics as engineering. SS Sturmbannführer Vera Poetsky arrived, commanding the remaining 1st SS Panzer Battalion, low on fuel and ammunition. Piper assured him, fuel was being distributed, ammo would come from captured American stocks, including crates of 75mm shells compatible with German guns. Take what you need, keep moving. Poetsky asked about food. Piper pointed to the K-Rations. Take enough for the men to eat now and carry more. Supplies were unpredictable. Poetsky distributed boxes to the tank crews. Veterans of France and Russia treated the American emergency rations like feasts compared to their normal meager provisions. Refueling finished at 0930. Piper ordered the column forward, tanks first, half-tracks next, support vehicles last. The column stretched several kilometers. Piper's command vehicle positioned near the front. The route led northwest toward Stavelot, 14 kilometers away, about 20 minutes at speed on good roads. But the roads were far from ideal: mud, refugees, destroyed vehicles. The Americans were retreating but resisting. Every village needed clearing, every bridge checked for demolitions. Piper's intelligence map indicated a major fuel depot at Stavelot, larger than Bullingen, near the town, though the exact location was unspecified. Piper assumed it would be obvious. Supply depots were large installations. Vehicles. Storage tanks. You could not hide something that big. The camp grouper reached Stavelot at 1,200 hours. The town sat on both sides of the Almlave River stone bridge in the center. American forces were defending the bridge. Piper's lead tanks engaged them. The Americans had anti-tank guns and were fighting hard. The battle for Stavelot lasted 3 hours. Piper's forces eventually forced the Americans back across the river. German engineers checked the bridge. Not demolished, intact. The Americans had but tried to blow it, but the charges failed to detonate. Lucky, without that bridge, the entire advance would stop. Piper's units crossed the bridge and entered the western part of Stavelot. They searched for the fuel depot. Intelligence said it was here. Near the town, large quantities, enough fuel to keep the offensive moving for days. They found nothing. Piper sent reconnaissance teams in all directions. Check the outskirts. Check the roads. Check every building. The fuel depot had to be somewhere. The Americans would not abandon 3 million gallons of gasoline. They would either defend it or destroy it. But Piper's men found no evidence of either. At 1,500 hours, one of his reconnaissance officers reported finding American supply dumps north of the town. Small amounts. Gerians scattered along the roads, maybe a few thousand gallons total. Not the major depot, not what intelligence had promised. Piper made a decision. The fuel depot either did not exist or the Americans had already evacuated it. Either way, he could not wait. His camp group had enough fuel to continue the advance. Not much, but enough. The mission was to reach the Meuse River. Every hour stopped was an hour wasted. Move on. The camp grouper departed Stavelot at 1,600 hours and continued west. Behind them, American engineers moved back into position. They had been watching from the hills. Once the Germans passed, they secured the bridge approaches. Stavelot would not fall completely. The Americans would hold positions south of the river. What Paper did not know was that the fuel depot existed. It was there. 3,200,000 gallons of gasoline stored in 5-gallon jerry cans stacked along a 5 mm stretch of road. Depot number 2 and Depot number 3, located 800 foot north of the road, Paper had used to approach Stavelot, 300 yards away. Paper had driven past 3 million gallons of fuel and never saw it. The Americans had not hidden the depot. They had not camouflaged it. The jerrycans were stacked in plain sight along the roadside. Thousands of them, millions of gallons right there. But Piper expected a fuel depot to look like German depots looked. Storage tanks, buildings, vehicles, infrastructure. The American depot was just jerrycans. Stacked, waiting. No guards, no vehicles, no buildings, just fuel in portable containers ready to be distributed wherever needed. Paper rolled past it looking for something that looked like a depot. He never found it because he was looking for the wrong thing. After the war, an American historian named Major Ken Heckler interviewed Piper. Heckler told Paper about the depot, 3 million gallons 300 yards from your route. Piper shrugged. He said he expected fuel to be piled in town squares like at Boolingen. When he did not find it in Stavelot, he assumed the Americans had moved it. That missed depot changed everything. With 3 million gallons, Piper could have refueled his entire camp grouper multiple times. He could have refueled other German units. He could have kept the offensive moving. The fuel crisis that eventually stopped the German advance would not have existed. But Piper never found it. And without fuel, his advance was doomed. December 21, 1944. Stoumont, Belgium. Major Hal Macau crouched in a cellar listening to German tanks surrounding his position. Macau commanded 2nd Battalion, 119th Infantry Regiment, 30th Infantry Division. His battalion had been fighting Paper's camp grouper for 3 days. Now they were cut off. The situation was deteriorating fast. German armor was everywhere. American defensive positions were collapsing. Macau's radio operator reported that German forces had broken through to the south. The battalion was surrounded. At 14:30 hours, German infantry stormed Macau's command post. Short firefight. 1 American killed. Macau and several of his staff were captured. The Germans searched them for weapons and intelligence documents. Took their personal items, watches, cigarettes, anything valuable. Macau was taken to a stone house on the edge of Stoumont, Piper's command post. The house was damaged, windows broken, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. Inside, German officers were studying maps and coordinating defensive positions because by December 21, Piper's offensive had stopped. His camp grouper was surrounded. No fuel, no ammunition, no supplies, no way forward, no way back. Piper was standing near a map table, tall, thin, 30 years old, aristocratic features, spoke perfect English. He saw Macau and walked over. They were the same rank. 2 battalion commanders, 1 German, 1 American. Both professional soldiers. Piper introduced himself. Asked Macau's name, unit, position. Macau gave the required information under Geneva Convention. Name, rank, serial, 2 number. Paper did not press for more. He seemed more interested in talking than interrogating. That night, Paper and Macau talked for 7 hours from 2300 hours until 0500 hours the next morning. They sat in a room with maps and talked about the war. Piper did most of the talking. Macau mostly listened. Piper defended Nazism, explained why Germany was fighting, justified German actions. Macau later said he had met few men who impressed him in so short a time. Paper was intelligent, educated, articulate, completely confident that Germany would win, even surrounded, even out of fuel, even with his camp group disintegrating. Paper believed Germany would win. Macau spent 3 days with Camp Group Piper. He observed everything: German supply conditions, morale, equipment, food, medical care. He made mental notes because he knew this information would be valuable. What Macau saw contradicted what Paper said. Paper claimed Germany was winning, but the evidence showed Germany was losing. German soldiers looked exhausted. They had been fighting for 5 days straight with minimal rest. Many wore parts of American uniforms, knit caps, gloves, sweaters, overshoes, even overcoats. They were wearing enemy clothing because their own logistics system could not provide adequate winter gear. The physical condition of the men was generally good. No starvation, no obvious malnutrition. But they were not eating well. German rations were scarce. Most men were eating captured American food. K-rations, C-rations, 10-in-1 rations. Whatever they had taken from overrun American positions. Macau watched German soldiers open American ration boxes. They examined the contents like children examining presents. Chocolate bars, real coffee, cigarettes. The small luxuries that American soldiers took for granted were precious to German troops who had not seen such things in months. 1. German soldiers showed Macau a can of ham from a K-ration. The soldiers said it was better than anything the Wehrmacht issued. The German army's canned meat was mostly fat and gristle, required cooking. Tasted bad. This American ham was real meat preserved properly, edible cold. The soldiers said, if Germany could produce rations like this, the war would be different. Macau said nothing. He was a prisoner. Arguing was pointless, but he understood what the soldier meant. If Germany could produce rations like American rations, they would. The fact that they could not meant they lacked the industrial capacity. And if they lacked capacity to produce food, they lacked capacity to produce everything else that sustained modern warfare. German medical supplies were critically short. The aid station at Stammen had no morphine, no sulfur drugs. Bandages were being reused. Wounded German soldiers screamed during treatment because there was nothing for pain. Macau saw amputations performed with minimal anesthesia. Men biting leather straps held down by comrades. Soaring through bone while the patient was conscious. American medical practice would consider that medieval. American aid stations had morphine, sulfur drugs, proper bandages, sterile instruments. American wounded received pain relief, antibiotics for infection, professional care. The Germans were improvising with inadequate supplies and doing the best they could, but their best was far below American standards. On December 22, the Luftwaffe attempted an aerial resupply of Camp Grouper paper. 6 planes flying low, dropping supply canisters by parachute. The drop zone was supposed to be inside German lines. Most canisters missed. They fell outside the perimeter. American forces recovered them. German soldiers watched supply canisters land 200 yards away in American positions, unreachable. The aerial resupply was a complete failure. Papers forces were now completely isolated, surrounded by American units. No fuel. No ammunition, dwindling food, no medical supplies, no way to evacuate. Wounded, 170 American prisoners, hundreds of German casualties. The situation was unsustainable. On December 23, Paper held a conference with his senior officers. Macau was present. He listened as German officers discussed their options. All options were bad. They could not advance. No fuel. They could not defend indefinitely. No ammunition. They could not retreat with vehicles. No fuel. They could attempt to break out on foot. Abandon everything. Tanks. Half-tracks. Vehicles. Wounded who could not walk. American prisoners. Everything. Paper made the decision: break out on foot. Destroy the vehicles. Leave the wounded with American medical supplies. Release the American prisoners. March east through the forest, try to reach German lines. It was the only option that gave his men any chance of survival. The breakout began at 0200 hours on December 24. 800 German soldiers moving through darkness, through snow, through forest. No vehicles, no heavy weapons, just small arms and whatever each man could carry. Macau escaped during the confusion. He made it back to American lines on December 25. He filed an immediate after-action report. Everything he had seen. German supply conditions. Equipment status, morale, food situation, medical care. The report was detailed and accurate. Macau later testified at the Melny trial in June 1946. He appeared as a defense witness. He testified that Paper's men had treated him correctly under Geneva Convention. He described the conditions inside German lines, the supply failures, the desperation, the professionalism of German soldiers fighting with inadequate resources. Macau said one thing clearly: the Germans lost at Stu not because of American tactical superiority. They lost because they ran out of supplies. Fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, everything. The Wehrmacht was an 80-day army that could no longer sustain itself in combat. No logistics, no chance of victory. Paper abandoned 7 Tiger II tanks at Lee, 50 medium tanks, 70 half-tracks, 135 vehicles. Everything immobilized because the fuel tanks were empty. Some of the most advanced armored vehicles in the world, left behind, useless. The tanks were intact, functional, loaded with ammunition, but without gasoline. They were just metal sculptures. Belgian civilians later recovered the vehicles. Some were placed in museums. Visitors ask why the Germans left them behind. The answer is always the same: no fuel. The tanks could not move. The crews could not stay. So they were abandoned. January 1945. Prisoner of war camp France, General Obert Assaut von Manteuffel sat in an interrogation room answering questions from American intelligence officers. Manteuffel commanded 5th Panzer Army during the Ardennes Offensive. Professional soldier, career officer, Eastern Front. Veteran. He had opposed the Ardennes plan from the beginning. The American officers asked detailed questions. What were German objectives? What resources were allocated? What went wrong? Manteuffel answered honestly. The war was over for him. No reason to lie. His answers would become foreign military studies manuscripts, official documents, historical record. Manteuffel explained that he and Field Marshal Model had argued against Hitler's plan. They wanted a limited offensive, smaller objectives, realistic goals. Hitler wanted Antwerp, cross the Meuse River, split the Allied armies, force negotiations. Hitler's plan was strategically impossible with available resources. The fuel allocation made success impossible. 5 million gallons for 3 armies, 1,400 tanks, thousands of vehicles. Basic mathematics showed it was insufficient. The planning assumed capturing American fuel depots. That assumption was a gamble. You cannot base military operations on inmate milita capturing enemy supplies. What if the Americans destroy the depots? What if you cannot find them? What if they defend them successfully? All 3 scenarios happened. Some depots were destroyed. Some were never found, some were defended.
The fuel crisis began immediately and never stopped.
Manteuffel
Said his tank units were crying for fuel as early as December 19.
Second day of the offensive. Units were already running dry. Supply trucks were not reaching the front. Captured fuel was insufficient. The entire offensive was grinding to a halt because panzers sat
immobilized, waiting for gasoline that never arrived.
The American interrogators asked about German logistics in general. Manteuffel was frank. German logistics had collapsed. Not just during the Ardennes offensive, the entire system. Since 1943, maybe earlier, the Eastern Front destroyed German logistics. The distances were too great. The roads were too poor. The Soviet resistance was too strong. German trucks broke down faster than they could be repaired.
Railways were constantly under
attack.
The Wehrmacht became dependent on horses.
Hundreds of thousands of horses pulling supply wagons like in 1870. By late 1944, some German divisions had
more horses than German divisions in World War I. Mechanized warfare fought
with horse-drawn logistics. The contradiction was fatal. Tanks moved faster than horses. Panzers could advance 20 kilometers in an hour. Supply wagons needed a full day to cover the same distance. Combat units outran their logistics and then stopped, immobilized, waiting for supplies that arrived too late or not at all.
The horse dependence created additional problems. Horses required
food. Approximately 20 pounds of fodder per day per animal.
A division with 5,000
horses needed 50 tons of horse feed daily just to sustain its logistics system. That feed had to be transported on roads already congested with military traffic.
Horses also died from exhaustion, from air attacks, from inadequate feed.
Dead horses blocked roads and required burial or disposal. American logistics used trucks exclusively. Trucks did not require daily feeding. They sat idle when not needed without consuming resources.
They moved faster, carried more, required
less maintenance personnel than horse-drawn wagons.
The American truck fleet numbered in hundreds of thousands. All standardized designs, all using interchangeable parts, all supported by
massive spare parts supply system. Allied strategic bombing made everything worse.
Every rail junction was a target. Every bridge was destroyed.
Every road was strafed by fighter bombers. German logistics units could only move at night. Daylight movement meant certain death from the air. American P-47s and
P-51s attacked anything that moved.
Supply columns were burned. Fuel trucks were destroyed. Food convoys were shot up. German production could not replace losses.
Factories were bombed.
Raw materials were scarce. Skilled workers were conscripted into combat units.
The industrial base was crumbling.
What the? Factories did produce often could not reach the front because transportation networks were destroyed. Manteuffel contrasted this with American logistics. The Americans had secure supply lines. Factories in America were safe from bombing 3,000 miles from the fighting. Producing war materials at rates Germany could never match.
Ships crossed the Atlantic constantly, delivering supplies. The port of Antwerp alone handled more tonnage per month than all German ports combined.
American supply depots were everywhere.
Fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts,
everything organized, abundant, redundant. Multiple depots meant losing. One did not matter. Standardized containers meant soldiers could handle supplies without special training.
Abundant production meant waste was acceptable if it increased speed of distribution.
German logistics had no excess capacity. Every supply dump was critical. Every fuel truck was precious, every ration was counted. The Wehrmacht operated on the edge of collapse constantly. One disruption meant crisis. Two disruptions meant disaster. The American officers asked Manteuffel when he knew Germany would lose the war. Manteuffel said he knew in 1943 after Kursk the VE could still win battles, but winning battles was not enough. Germany needed to win the war. That required resources. Germany did not have industrial capacity, oil, food, manpower, time. The Americans had all of those things. Functionally unlimited industrial capacity. Secure oil supplies from Texas and the Middle East. Agricultural production that fed both military and civilians. A population of 130 million. Time to mobilize that population and deploy it. Germany had lost the resource war before the shooting war ended. Once America entered the conflict, German defeat was inevitable. Not immediate, not easy, but inevitable. The mathematics were simple. America could produce more tanks, more planes, more bullets, more food, more everything than Germany could destroy. Eventually, American material superiority would grind German resistance into dust. The Ardennes offensive was a final desperate gamble. Use the last strategic reserves, achieve one dramatic victory, force the Allies to negotiate. Hitler believed will and courage could overcome material disadvantage. Manteuffel knew better. Will and courage matter, but logistics matter more. An army without supplies cannot fight regardless of how brave its soldiers are. The offensive failed. German losses were catastrophic. 600 tanks destroyed or abandoned. 34,000 killed, 60,000 wounded or missing. The Wehrmacht's last mobile reserves were gone. After the Ardennes, Germany could only retreat. No more offensives, no more grand strategic plans, just fighting, delaying actions until the inevitable end. Manteuffel was asked to write detailed reports on the Ardennes offensive. 5th Panzer Army operations. Planning, execution, lessons learned. He wrote 148 pages, then another 161 pages. Foreign Military Studies Manuscripts B151 and B151A, Professional Military Analysis, Balanced Assessments, Credit to American Performance, Honest Evaluation of German Failures. His tone was clinical, detached, professional. He faulted German shortcomings. He credited Allied successes, no excuses, no propaganda, just factual analysis. This is what happened. This is why it happened. These were the mistakes. These were the consequences. Other German generals were less honest in their post-war statements. They blamed Hitler. They blamed weather. They blamed bad luck. They blamed everything except the fundamental problem. Germany lacked the industrial and logistical capacity to sustain modern warfare against opponents with superior resources. Manteuffel did not make excuses. He stated facts. Germany lost because Germany was outproduced, outsupplied, and outsustained. The German army in December 1944 was still capable of tactical excellence, but tactical excellence without strategic resources meant eventual defeat. The interrogation concluded. Manteuffel was returned to the prisoner compound. He would spend the next year in American custody, then release, then return to Germany, then a long post-war life. He lectured at West Point in 1968. He gave interviews for documentaries. He remained a professional soldier providing honest analysis until his death. His legacy was his honesty. Unlike many German generals who rewrote history to excuse failures, Manteuffel told the truth. The Ardennes offensive failed because of logistics. The war was lost because of industrial capacity. No amount of tactical skill could overcome material disadvantage. February 1946, Nuremberg, Germany. SS.
Ostgruppenführer ISF Dietrich sat in a cell waiting for his trial.
Dietrich commanded 6th SS Panzer Army during the Ardennes Offensive.
Former butcher. Hitler's bodyguard. Promoted far beyond his competence, an
American psychiatrist named Leon Golden interviewed Dietrich. Golden's zone was
documenting the psychological state of Nazi war criminals. He talked with Dietrich on February 28.
The conversation ranged across multiple topics: the war, National Socialism, the offensive defeat. At one point, Dietrich made a sardonic comment about his army.
He said, "We call ourselves the 6th Panzer Army because we have only got 6 panzers left."
Dark humor, gallows humor. But accurate. The offensive had destroyed his army. Losses were staggering: equipment gone, men dead or captured, what remained barely qualified as a functioning military unit. Dietrich
was not a strategic thinker. Hermann Göring later remarked of him, "He is decent but foolish." At most, he had the capacity to command a division.
Hitler gave him an army.
The results were predictable. The 6th Panzer Army was supposed to lead the main advance, but it stalled immediately. Poor planning, traffic jams, fuel shortages, and American resistance halted progress. Dietrich's army was allocated fuel for 90 to 100 miles, but the distance to Antwerp was 140 miles.
Even if everything went perfectly, the fuel allotment was inadequate.
The plan explicitly required seizing American gasoline depots.
Without captured fuel, the offensive could not succeed.
The entire operation depended on taking enemy supplies, exposing the Germans' logistical weakness.
You cannot base military operations on capturing enemy resources; it is desperation disguised as strategy.
Experienced officers like Montufar understood this, political appointees like Dietrich did not.
Journalists from Golden Zone asked Dietrich about the offensive's failure.
He blamed everything except logistics, American air power, weather, terrain, and even Hitler for unrealistic objectives. While these were valid complaints, he never mentioned that his army ran out of fuel because German logistics could not support the attack.
After the war, both American and German historians concluded the same thing: the Ardennes offensive failed primarily due to logistics.
Fuel shortages halted the advance, limited ammunition, artillery support, and food undermined soldier effectiveness. Shortages of medical supplies meant wounded men died who could have been saved.
German tactical performance was often competent. Individual units fought well.
Officers made sound decisions with available resources, and soldiers showed courage and skill.
But tactics cannot overcome logistical failure.
An army without fuel cannot advance; without ammunition, it cannot attack; without food, it cannot sustain operations. The Americans won the Battle of the Bulge not primarily through superior tactics, but through superior logistics. They moved reinforcements faster than the Germans advanced, supplied defensive positions adequately, replaced losses from reserves, and maintained operations through harsh winter conditions that degraded German capabilities. By December 1944, American logistics was a mature system: 5 years of development, vast infrastructure, dedicated logistics units, specialized vehicles, standardized procedures, supply depots strategically located across Europe, and transportation networks that moved supplies from factories to frontline foxholes in weeks. April 1945, American Interrogation Center, Germany. Joachim Peiper sat across from interrogators, answering questions about Kampfgruppe Peiper's operations. The war was ending.
Germany was collapsing.
Peiper would soon face war crimes charges for the Malmedy massacre, but for now, the Americans sought tactical information. Peiper described the offensive in detail: planning, execution, problems encountered, and decisions made.
He was cooperative and professional, answering questions accurately without defiance or evasion. The Americans asked about fuel: when did you run out? Where did you refuel? What depots did you capture?
Peiper explained the fuel crisis. Bullingen provided 50,000 gallons, enough to reach Stavelot, but at Stavelot, he found no major depot, only small amounts scattered along roads.
He continued west with minimal fuel, reaching Stumont completely dry. An American officer asked if he knew about the Stavelot depot, 3 million gallons, 800 feet from his route.
Peiper said he did not. The interrogator showed him a map, pointing out thousands of jerrycans stacked along the road. Piper had passed within 300 yards. He looked at the map, shrugged slightly, and said in English, "I am sorry." He explained he had expected fuel to be concentrated in the town, piled in squares like Bullingen.
When he did not find it, he assumed the Americans had evacuated it. He never thought to look for jerrycans stacked along roadsides.
The missed depot was a tactical error, nothing more, but it had strategic consequences. With 3 million gallons, Kampfgruppe Piper could have refueled multiple times, continued advancing, and potentially reached the Meuse River, achieving the breakthrough that was the offensive's goal.
Perhaps not. American resistance, air power, and reinforcements still posed obstacles.
Logistics alone would not have guaranteed victory, but it would have changed the outcome. More German advance, more casualties, more territory captured, and a longer battle.
American logistics was simple, efficient, and abundant.
Supplies were distributed without formal structures, ready for use. German logistics emphasized control and formal procedures, which were fragile. Disrupt one part, and the entire system failed.
American logistics was resilient, redundant, and flexible. Multiple depots, standardized containers, and mass production allowed soldiers to access supplies without special training.
German logistics emphasized control and efficiency. American logistics emphasized abundance and speed.
Over time, the American approach prevailed. Piper was returned to confinement after the interrogation.
He would face trial, conviction, imprisonment, eventual release, and live a long post-war life, dying in France in 1976 under mysterious circumstances. His tactical decisions were analyzed thoroughly, and the missed Stavelot fuel depot remained his most consequential error, not a moral failing or war crime, just a mistake that exemplified Germany's larger failure. The Wehrmacht expected American logistics to resemble their own: concentrated depots, predictable patterns, and formal structures.
But American logistics was distributed, flexible, and abundant.
The K-Ration embodied this system. Not the reason America won, but a symbol of why it did. In 1944 alone, 105 million K-Rations were produced, each containing 2,830 calories across 3 individually packaged meals, manufactured in secure factories, shipped across the Atlantic, and delivered to soldiers fighting on multiple fronts. German soldiers opened these boxes and saw food, but they should have seen industrial capacity, transportation networks, and an economic system capable of producing and delivering millions of meal packages monthly.
Small luxuries, chocolate, cigarettes, gum demonstrated excess capacity.
German rations reflected scarcity, inadequate nutrition, poor quality, irregular distribution, dependence on field kitchens.
By May 1945, Germany surrendered.
Wehrmacht soldiers were starving, supply systems had collapsed. Many German POWs gained weight in American captivity because they received regular meals for the first time in months. One soldier recalled, "When I was captured, I weighed 128 pounds.
After 2 years as an American POW, I weighed 185. I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes."
American prison camp rations exceeded German field rations.
The Ardennes offensive ended in January 1945. German forces withdrew, and American counterattacks pushed them back.
By March, the Allies crossed the Rhine. By April, they surrounded Berlin. By May, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Ardennes operation consumed Germany's last strategic reserves without achieving strategic objectives. Units committed to the offensive were destroyed, scattered, or incapable of sustained operations. Meanwhile, American forces grew stronger, receiving more equipment and supplies, and their logistics continued functioning efficiently.
Germany lost World War II because it could not sustain modern warfare against opponents with superior industrial and logistical capacity. Strategic errors and tactical mistakes contributed, but the decisive factor was economic. The United States and the Soviet Union possessed industrial economies capable of producing war materials faster than Germany could destroy them. Germany did not. That disparity determined the outcome.
American logistics superiority extended beyond rations. The U.S. produced 400,000 trucks, Germany 140,000. American factories delivered 63,000 tanks, Germany 46,000, which were more maintenance-heavy and fuel-dependent. Aircraft, America built 300,000. Germany 120,000.
Allied bombing destroyed German factories faster than they could replace them.
German soldiers saw abandoned American equipment in supply dumps with more food and ammunition than they had seen in months.
They war-captured American uniforms because German logistics could not supply proper winter clothing.
Every encounter with American supplies reinforced the lesson: the enemy had everything, Germany had nothing. This knowledge affected combat effectiveness. Soldiers who know they are losing fight differently than those confident of victory. German soldiers fought bravely, but bravery is limited when cold, hungry, and aware that even winning today means facing more American soldiers tomorrow with better supplies. American soldiers fought with confidence, knowing reinforcements, resupply, and medical care were guaranteed. This enabled sustained resistance even in desperate situations. By January 1945, the logistical gap was absolute. German units abandoned vehicles for lack of fuel, American units had surplus. German soldiers scavenged, Americans ate hot meals.
German wounded went without morphine, American wounded received proper care.
The final months confirmed the lesson of the Battle of the Bulge. Germany could not sustain military operations against an opponent with functioning logistics. When supply lines collapsed, German units surrendered not due to lack of courage or skill, but due to lack of fuel, food, ammunition, and hope. When American forces entered Germany, they found infrastructure destroyed, factories reduced to rubble, rail yards cratered, roads impassable. The industrial base supporting German operations no longer existed. Meanwhile, American factories continued producing war materials at full capacity.
The economic war had already been decided.
The K-Ration embodied this reality. A waterproof cardboard box containing 3 individually packaged meals with luxuries like chocolate and cigarettes, recently manufactured, abundant, and distributed efficiently.
Logistics, not heroics, had won the war. Tactics, strategy, and leadership mattered, but without logistics, nothing else could succeed.